So let's start with the word tyranny. We toss around a lot of terms these days, right? And a lot of them are for effect politically. Make the case that indeed we're victims of tyranny from the oligarchs there in Silicon Valley.
Well, oligarchs is really the right word. I'm glad you keyed in on that. Just look at what these big tech companies, monopolies, that's what they are. Just look what they've tried to do just in the last, 6 months, 9 months. They've interfered in a presidential election by trying to suppress reporting about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden right in the thick of the presidential election. They got together, throttled down that New York Post story. Look what they did in January when they kicked the sitting president of the United States off of their platforms, deplatformed other conservatives and libertarians, and have generally tried to control and censor speech in this country for millions of Americans. It's crazy stuff. Their power is only getting more and more vast because their monopolies are only getting bigger. And I try to argue in the book that we've got to take them on. We've got to break up these monopolies.
So when this issue, Josh, when it first emerged a couple of years ago, my initial conservative inclinations are, man, I really do not want government getting involved here. Okay. Because I erroneously thought that these things still existed in a free market. Then I started talking to people that have tried to start companies or alternatives to these platforms. And it's not just the market share that they control. That would be monopolistic on its own, but the means of production itself they control. It's a little bit like if you wanted to compete with Standard Oil 100 years ago, you couldn't even buy a rig, land. I mean, they owned everything. Okay. And so you develop a phenomenal competitor to Twitter. Good luck getting it actually marketed in the various app stores that Google controls, Apple controls. So it's not just, hey, they came up with a great product. You know, we had this debate about Windows in the 90s, right? And should that be open sourced or not? It's not just that they came up with a great product that just controls the marketplace. That would be a monopolistic debate in and of itself. But these companies even control the means of production and distribution, which just makes it virtually impossible for you to compete with them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And Parler is an illustration of this. You look at a competitor, potential competitor to Twitter, still very small, but it was beginning to get some traction back towards the first of the year, end of last year. And what happened? When Apple and Google, who control the two app stores, and then Amazon, that controls much of the cloud, when they decided that they wanted Parler to be gone, snap of the fingers, it's gone in like 48 hours. That's monopoly power. And the reason, I'm with you, by the way, on the need for free markets and competition. That's what we need more of. And the reason that folks can't go to alternative platforms is there aren't any alternative platforms. And the reason there aren't alternative platforms is that the dominant monopolies are suppressing competition and suppressing new market entrants.
So I've used this analogy on this issue in the past. Tell me if you think it's appropriate. When I was a kid, Ma Bell got broken up by the courts, I believe it was. Now imagine in the 50s, 60s, 70s before that occurred. Ma Bell had decided, you know, we don't like what you'll say over our phone lines. We don't like the opinions you'll convey. We don't like the viewpoints you possessed. We don't want those things said over our phone lines. So we're not going to allow you to plug in to the information age of that era. I can't even imagine. I mean, they were broken up strictly for monopolistic antitrust business practices. But if they tried to put their thumb on the scale ideologically, we probably would have broken them up a lot sooner than the 1980s. Is that an appropriate analogy to what is going on here? We won't let you plug into the information age of your era unless you fit through our personal Overton window.
Yeah, I think it really is. And I think the control over information that these companies have, the big tech companies have, is something that's really unprecedented in our history. I mean, as you point out, the telephone companies at least never tried to control the flow of information or news, but the tech companies do. They control what we see. They control how news stories are written. You know, they famously forced journalists to rewrite stories, to change the way that the stories are constructed, to change how headlines are written, all of that stuff. The tech companies are now the major distribution channels for news in this country. And as we found out last fall, they get to decide what news is relevant, what's not, and what people are going to see. And if you don't like it, you don't have any recourse right now. That is a huge, huge problem, which is another reason why we've got to break up their power and restore some real competition to these markets.
So let's get some remedies then. There was a lot of debate the last year plus of Section 230. I think we're way beyond that. I think we're looking at antitrust conversations of are these public utilities or not. But what do you think? I mean, you're on the front lines of this every day. What are the remedies here?
Yeah, I agree with you on Section 230. I mean, listen, what we can do under 230 is we can give individuals the right to sue if they are deplatformed and the platforms don't do this in good faith. You know, right now, the terms of service that Facebook, let's say, Google, Twitter, that they offer you, those aren't enforceable. If they violate those terms of service and they deplatform you for reasons that aren't in good faith, you can't do anything about it. I think we can and should give people the right to enforce those terms of service, make sure that these companies are acting in good faith. And the way to do that is take them to court. So we could do that, but I think we've got to do more than that. We've got to break them up. We've got to actually make sure that Amazon can't control all e-commerce in this country and control the cloud in this country. And make sure that Google can't control all search in this country and then also control fiber optics. I mean, we've got to break these companies up and restore some real competition. And the last thing I'd say is this: if none of that's possible, then we are going to have to treat them like utilities. We are going to have to treat them like common carriers. I think that would be my last choice. But if at the end of the day, the companies can't be broken up, we can't get enforcers to do it, we can't get the law changed to really address these current needs, then we're going to have to treat them like utilities and common carriers.